We have almost 5 million Americans who've been adopted in the United States since the 1930s, and an even higher percentage of people who don't know their biological fathers. But these individuals aren't just numbers and statistics. They're real-life people. People searching for the missing pieces of their lives. People who are turning to social media for assistance by complete strangers who have volunteered their time and talents to provide them with those answers. We call these strangers search angels. And with the bravery of those searchers and the skills of the angels, they're reuniting families and solving decades-old mysteries. These are their stories. Join us on the journey to discovery. I'm Kathy Williams, and this is Search Angel Chronicles. Cheryl's request for help was much like many others in our private Facebook group, Search Squad, when she wrote, "I'm looking for my birth father. I believe his name is George Jensen Jr. He was stationed on the Navy USS Pritchett in California during the 60s. His mother was Edith Hazel, and his father shared the same name. He has two brothers, Nicholas and Eric, and a sister, Violet. I was born in January of 1964 in Herbeston, Oregon. My mother's name is Vivian. She was born in January of 45. Any information would be great. Thank you in advance." And sometimes, despite all the information that we might have, it still takes a little help from a search angel to put it all together and to guide us through the process. Cheryl and her search angel, Lana, join us today to tell us the rest of her story. Welcome, Cheryl, and thank you for being here. Will you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I live in Veradale, Washington, and I'm a piano teacher. Um, I teach full time. I'm also a recording artist and composer, so I have a couple albums out that can be heard on all streaming platforms. And I'm married, and I have two children who are grown and gone.
Right.
I love them, but I love being an empty nester. And we live in a beautiful area, and we like to do a lot of fun things. I'm a huge backpacker, so my summertime is spent backpacking and/or fly fishing. I love tying my own little flies to catch the big
All
one.
right, that's awesome.
So lots of fun outdoors hobbies as well.
Great. And Washington's a great place to do that. Such beautiful scenery, right? So, Cheryl, you have a little bit of a unique story um, in your early years of your life. And so many of us that were adopted at birth, and we just don't have any information. But would you share a little bit about your beginning?
Yes, my earliest recollections were probably before grade school. And my birth mother that I was with was very transient. We moved all the time. I don't ever really remember having our own home or our own place until I was in first grade. And it wasn't too far from the school, so the first day of first grade, my birth mother walked me to school. But then at the end of the day, I was supposed to figure out how to get home all by myself, which is amazing to me as an adult. I look back and I'm just like, I would never let my first grader try to manage getting home by themselves. And so, but I did, and I got home to where we were currently living. And I noticed a car out in the front. And once I got inside, I learned that I now had a caseworker. Didn't fully understand what that was at 6 years of age, but I was being taken by him and placed in foster care, supposedly just for the weekend. And so we left. He delivered me not too far from where my birth mother was living, and I entered foster care for the first time. Well, within that weekend, my birth mother had skipped town and nobody had heard from her for over a year. And so I continued going to the same school that I did on the very first day. And then after about a year, my mother came back into my world, and they said, well, you've got to go through all these hoops to get your kids back. And so she did. And then we were placed back with her um, in a different town, still in Washington. And it wasn't very long. I was placed in foster care for a good reason. All of the abuses had happened to me, and days at a time she would leave, and there was no food in the house. And because I was the oldest, about second, third grade this time, I was responsible for feeding my two younger brothers. And often there wasn't much more than just a jar of peanut butter and maybe a box of cereal. No milk, so
Mm.
we ate dry cereal pretty much all the time. Uh, we just lived that life for about a year, and then I got a call as a second grader in the middle of the night. It was my birth mom, and she said, "I need you to take everything that you guys have, put it in a sack, like our clothes, and which wasn't very much. But I need you to put everything, get your brother's clothes, get your clothes, put it in a sack. There's going to be somebody coming to the door, and I need you to go with them." And I start to ask questions, and I'm wondering, like where where she is, when will she be home, all of this sort of thing. And she never said anything. She just hung up. And so there was no I love yous or don't worry, I'll come and get you when I can. There was nothing. So in the middle of the night, a police car pulls up in front of our door, and there's a knock on the door, and it's my caseworker. And he takes me and my two brothers and puts us in the back seat of a police car like we're criminals. And we drove through the night to, another foster home. And so I was in and out of foster care until about fourth grade. And um, it was not easy. But by fourth grade, I knew that I was not going to be placed back with my mother. I knew nobody was coming to get me. And so in fourth grade, I had made it was kind of a big year for me because I kind of realized that. But I eventually ended up back with the first foster family that I was with, and their last name was Green. And so they were an elderly couple, probably in their 60s, and they took in this first grader for the weekend. And then here I end up coming back to them, a year or two later, and they had, plans to be snowbirds, go to Arizona in the winter, come back to Washington in the summer. And I came along, and they never fulfilled that dream. They gave that up in order to make sure that I had some stability in my life, which I'm eternally grateful. One thing about the Greens, they went to a small community Bible church. And so they, first Sunday that I was with them, the first time in first grade, we got up, they're getting dressed, and it looks like they were going to somewhere fancy or important because, Betty Green was wearing a dress, Denver was wearing a suit and a tie, and I'm like, "Oh, where are you guys going?" And they're like, "Oh no, we're all going. We're going to go to church." And I'm like, "What's church?" And so Betty was very loving and kind and just said, "Well, this is where we go to learn more about Jesus. We read the Bible to learn more about him, and then we also sing songs to worship him." And all of that language lingo didn't mean anything to me because I had not been raised up that way. Um, my upbringing was, very hard rock, a lot of drug parties, people, I unfortunately have very vivid memories of what that looked like as a small child. And so we went to this church, and the very first Sunday, there's a piano being played, and my ear and my eyes just go directly to that instrument. And I was very drawn to it. And I thought, wow, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Well, within time, I realized that this church was filled with a lot of elderly people. And so they afterwards would stand around and they would talk. And so nobody really noticed when I would kind of slip up to the piano and I started pressing the keys. I was trying to imitate what I had seen by the person who was playing the piano. And so within no time, I was tinkering a lot on that piano. Well, skip, a few years in and out of foster care. By the time I'm fourth grade, somebody had asked the Greens if I knew how to play the piano. And they said, no, she's just a foster child and she's never had lessons. And so they said, well, I know how to play. I'm not necessarily a teacher, but I would love to give her free piano lessons, and just see how it goes. So that was a big year because I began my piano lessons in fourth grade. It was the other reason it was a big year is because going to that little Bible church, I realized the Greens showed me who that really was, the Lord, and that his light was, um, what it's really all about. And so I had a conversation with God and I just said, hey, it's me, Cheryl, and I know that they tell me that you're my father. And so I'm going to tell you, I'm willing to give you my life, but here's the deal, God. If you ever leave me, I will be so pissed. I will never come back. I'll never talk to you again. As a 10-year-old, I'm having that kind of conversation. And so those two big things in my life helped me to propel forward and to, continue to grow as a person. And then at 16, the state of Washington realized that my birth mother had not made any efforts to come back and regain my custody. And so they revoked her rights as a parent and had a court date. She was supposed to show up. I was supposed to show up, and my foster parents were supposed to show up. So we get there. Everybody's there except my birth mother. She never showed up. So the court looked at me and said, Cheryl, you are 16 years old. As far as I can see, you have three choices. You can either walk away from the whole foster system and be on your own, or you can be moved to a different foster home, or you can choose to be adopted. The Greens have offered to adopt you if that's what you wanted. Now, the Greens taught me a lot of things, not just about the Lord, but they taught me work ethic. They taught me I can do anything and be anything I want to be if I set my mind to it. And so at a very early age, when I was 10, even, I lived in an agricultural area, and the local farmers would often hire the local kids to pick green beans. And so I know it sounds like an old people's story, but it really is true. At 10, I was picking green beans in the field, and all of my neighborhood friends, we all had our own row. And so we started picking 5 cents a pound. And so it was real important that you pick fast and get lots of beans because then that meant more money. So I remember having a conversation with some of the other kids who were also picking, and they were talking about what they were going to buy with their first paycheck, and I was just quiet. I just kept picking. I didn't have time to have too much chit chat going on. And they asked me that, like, Cheryl, what are you going to do with your check? And I said, oh, I'm not spending it at all. I'm saving it because I'm going to go somewhere and I'm going to be somebody someday. I'm going to see the world and I'm going to have a different lifestyle. And so I continued to pick. So I also saved money because when I was older, 16 to 18, and trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life, my foster parents, who became my adoptive parents at 16, had said, we have 5 children. We've never helped any of them through college. Um, that's not going to happen with you either. I was like, okay. So I saved money and saved money. And fortunately, probably after my 6th grade, my parents were told by this piano teacher of mine, you need to find her a professional teacher. I've taught her everything I know in the last 2 years, and she's got something. We need to, keep nurturing this. So I began professional lessons in the seventh grade, and I, just continued to grow as a musician. And so when time came to, decide like, okay, what are you doing? I chose that I wanted to major in music. And I went and I played two or three pieces for the professors, and they went, okay, we're going to write you a check. And I put myself through college on scholarships and grants.
Awesome.
And so that, became my life. And later I became a piano teacher and I've taught piano for years and years. So that's kind of
Yeah.
the
Right.
background of who I
Yeah.
am and how I've gotten to be where I am today.
So you've always known who your birth mother was. And there was a father listed on your birth certificate. Um, but when did you decide maybe you should look into that side of the family?
Well, I really didn't have a desire for most of my life, just because the name on my birth certificate was actually the father of my brother, who is just younger than me. And my mother had been pregnant with me, and she had told who she thought was the father that she was pregnant with me. And he said, nope, that child is not mine. And he was in the Navy, so he left. So she kind of had moved back closer towards her hometown, and uh, had met somebody else. And he said they decided they were going to get married, but my mother was still pregnant. So they decided to wait until 6 months after I was born. And then while she was in the hospital having me, the certificate where you put down your child's name. She didn't know what to put down for a last name, which I know today we think is kind of funny. You just put the mother's last name. But back then in the 60s, you, needed a father's last name. And she didn't know what to do. So my brother's father said, well, just put my last name down because we're going to get married anyway. And so that's what she did. It was not my real last name. And then 6 months later, they got married. And then I'm not sure how much longer after that, but I was told as growing up in foster care, because I would have visits with her every once in a while, not very often, but she told me that my father, is listed on my birth certificate, he left us on a riverbank. So now she's pregnant with my brother, and I'm just a little girl, like toddler, and she's homeless, and supposedly, she had nowhere to go. So I really never had a desire to look for my father because with that information, I thought, why would I want to know somebody who would leave a woman who's pregnant and a little child on a
Right.
riverbank? That's just not the kind of person I would want to know.
Exactly.
So it wasn't until I was like 55, 56, I have a friend in Canada who, very similar situation to mine, had we had been having a conversation, and she was all excited because she had been finding siblings. Her father had already passed away, but she felt like she was getting to know her father just by knowing her siblings. And she was the one who encouraged me to do a DNA test. And so
And
I thought about it. My husband, he wasn't so much on board with it. He said, "But you're loved. You know, you're you have everything. You lack nothing." I said, "That's true." And he said, "I grew up without a father because my husband's father had passed away when he was only in his 30s, and so from a heart attack. And so my husband never really, got to know his dad. Doesn't have too many memories, but he had family who would tell stories about his dad. So he felt like he knew who his dad was. And I just told him, I said, you have those memories. You have pictures of your dad holding you. I don't have anything. I just have this black wall on one side of me, and it's just black. And so I feel like I want to do this. And it took him a little while, and then he finally got on board with it, and he was very much excited
yeah,
about it.
I remember telling my husband, hey, I can, take these steps to find out who my family is. And he got real quiet and he said, Kathy, you can't unknow something. Are you really sure you want to walk down this
Mhm.
path? And I was like, what do you mean? There's, and I certainly knew he obviously was trying to protect me. And I appreciated that. And I think that's probably where your husband's thoughts were as well. He didn't want to see you go through any more pain or trauma than you'd already been through. But there's
Exactly.
something
And,
about the knowing.
he was the voice of reason through the whole
Mhm.
thing. He's like, now, what's going to happen if you don't find him? Or what's going to happen if you do find him and he doesn't want anything to do with you? What's going to happen? He was always there to give me that solid ground and voice of reasoning for
Right,
sure.
right. So you took a 23andMe test to start off with, and you had a pretty good match that you connected with who was able to give you some more information. But then you also were guided to tested ancestry. Did somebody suggest or recommend you should also test an ancestry?
Yes, that lead took me to a person who knew of my father and was able to give me a name. It was the first time I had ever heard his name. And so I started doing my research and I was coming up against a bunch of, dead ends. And I thought, what do I do? And then another friend said, hey, have you ever thought about um, getting a search angel? And I'm like, what's a search angel? And so my neighbor came over and we sat at my kitchen table and we're trying to do all of
Mm-hmm.
this researching and discovered that it's a group of volunteers who help you, find missing
Right.
people. And so I was like, okay. So we looked at different groups, but we found a search squad, and the reason we chose it is because it had the most members. And we thought the more people in this group, maybe the better chances of finding out who we really are looking
Right.
for. And so that's when I was tagged with Lana, and she became my search
Yeah,
angel.
let's talk about that a minute. So Lana Alton is, or was, is, I don't think we ever stop being someone's search angel once we've taken them under our wing. Um, Lana
Mhm.
volunteers with the group Search Squad. She's also a senior admin. She probably spends as many hours searching for people as she does just trying to guide them through the process of getting that first post posted, kind of making sure everybody's following the rules. Lana's one of those people that when we have a need within the group, we ask her and she never says no. She always just jumps right in and helps with anything that we need. So, Lana, tell us, how did you become a search angel?
I was adopted by my stepdad when I was 6 years old. And I was 17 and wondering, why do I have blue eyes? My mom and my brother have brown eyes. Why am I so tall? My mom's 5'4". So I just wanted to know where I came from. And I knew his name. So I, excuse me, started doing some looking and calling because I remember where he worked, what type of work he did. And I thought, I'll just drive around and see what I can find. And I found him. And then in 1996, um, my uh, my former husband had three siblings that were removed from his mother's care and adopted out. And he and his mother both expressed a desire to know where those three children were and what happened to them. And it took me about a year of letter writing and uh, using databases, which, in the 90s weren't so great. And I didn't have the internet. So I eventually found them, and it was such an amazing feeling to reunite the children with their mother, but also to introduce them to my former husband. It was just very gratifying. So move ahead to about 2018, I saw an article about the Paradise Fire here in California and how Search Squad was involved. And I thought, that is something I can do because, in addition to being a search angel, I am a licensed private investigator. So I have some skills. And so I came on board. I got involved, and then they asked me to become a moderator. Okay, let's do this. So it was really a rewarding experience to be able to read people's stories and then to provide answers. And it's fulfilling for me, but they get their answers about where they came from and why did they look the way they do. And so now I I've expanded on my DNA skills since I first started because that was new to me, and I just really enjoy it. I feel called to do it. It's um, one of the best things I've done for myself,
Mm-hmm.
is to give back
Right.
in this
Yeah.
way.
I want to back up just a minute. So we talked about Cheryl taking a 23andMe test first. And then, so typically a search angel or people who do kind of what we do, we always recommend Ancestry as a first test. Um, and that's because Ancestry has such a larger database. Ancestry has tested 25 million people as of March of this year. And 23andMe has tested 14 million, which is nothing to sneeze at. But as far as just sheer volume of matches that you might get at the different platforms, Ancestry is a larger pool. They also have some tools that we um, most of most of us really like, and they help us determine family, I think, a little bit easier than 23andMe. So Lana, you read Cheryl's post. You see it posted in the group. And one of the first questions that you asked her was, "Have you done any DNA testing?" Because she didn't say that in her original post, I don't think. But that was one of the very first questions you asked
Mm-hmm.
her. So can you tell me, like, we know sometimes somebody posts and they have a name. She had a lot of information about her father,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes
Yeah.
that's not enough, or sometimes he's not easy to find. And then I know the other thing is that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes just because you have a name and lots of information doesn't necessarily mean he's your father. But so you
Right.
ask her if she's DNA tested. Can you tell us why that was important to you right off the bat?
Um, because her mother wasn't honest about her birth father, and I wanted confirmation that this indeed was the right path.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just to verify, with Ancestry, it may not give you a parent match, but it'll give you first cousins, siblings, first cousin was removed, and they all lead back to that one person that you are searching for. So that's the hope, is that it will confirm that the information that Cheryl had was accurate. Um, and she did have, if I recall, the ancestry test results were in limbo. We were still
We were
waiting for
still
the
waiting on them.
results,
Right.
right? When you
Yeah.
posted. So it was okay, I'll take a look at the information that Cheryl provided and see what I can come up with. But then when our
Mm-hmm.
ancestry results came in, it was like,
Yeah.
great.
Tell us,
I mean,
Cheryl.
it was,
Tell us what's good. Cheryl, you
oh,
get your ancestry results. What is the first thing you see?
I see that I am a 100% match with a parent child to the man who is my father. And yeah, I can't even talk about it without getting emotional. And it's been, a few years now. And I couldn't believe it. I also found out I had a lot more siblings, and I was kind of in the middle of his children. And so it was like all the why questions, how did this happen? Why, just didn't make any sense to
Yeah.
me. But it was a little overwhelming. And so just trying to breathe. But, it's like, how do you even begin to find them?
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So, a lot of what we do is theorize. We come up with theories and while DNA can give us answers to who we are, it can't fill in all the whys and all of the additional questions that we have. And so I used to make the mistake as a search angel when I would see a parent match. I would think, oh, this is wonderful. They must be looking for you. But I found out that isn't always the case. So, did that cross your
not
mind?
always.
Did you think, oh, he's tested because he must be looking for me? Did that cross your mind at all?
No.
Okay.
Um, Honestly, I couldn't believe that it was even a match. I didn't even think that way or that far at
Hmm.
all.
Yeah. And of 25 million people, of course, there weren't that many testers back then, but there were a lot. That of all those people, though, to have that one person who you really need confirmation to test is pretty wild in itself. So, Lana, you're still just confirming, making sure everything's right. Do you remember how
Hmm.
difficult it was to actually find like his location? Is he still living? Because we look at a lot of things. We don't just look at where he is. We try to look, kind
Uh-huh.
of find their family situation. Are they married? That kind of thing. Do you remember trying to
Right.
to locate him?
Uh, I do. And even prior to Cheryl getting her test results back, I started looking for him. Um, and, common last name and, approximate age range that he likely would have been. And there were several people in the United States with his name. So when Cheryl's ancestry results came back, um, first thing I noticed was that his DNA test was managed by a woman with the same last name. So I thought either it's a child or his spouse. So I started doing some digging. I knew that he had been um, on the West Coast. I looked for marriage records. And because I had her name also, it was pretty easy to find uh, in my databases couples with his name and her name. But the marriage record was what led me to them. I found it in Nevada, going online, and just, curiosity. So um, it was a wonderful feeling knowing that, oh my gosh, we have the guy,
Right. Yeah.
and then I compared her other matches and could see where the connection was with two of them. So, and that's looking at California Birth Index, and so um, that was that was just an amazing feeling. It's like, oh my gosh,
Hmm.
this is great. This is him.
That's him.
So, and not very far away.
That's good. So, Cheryl, you know who your father is now. You know where he's living. Are you anxious to reach out? Are you, some people like to take a deep breath and just digest the information. Some people like, nope, got to do this right away. Where did you fall in that?
Well, in conversing with Alana, I was just like, I don't know what to do. And, as I mentioned before, it was a little overwhelming with all the information that was coming in. Even though it was exciting, I just didn't know
Hmm.
where to go. And she held my hand through it. She said, I think you need to write a letter because at this age, you don't know what his health condition is. If he has Alzheimer's or, maybe he's had a stroke and can't talk, you don't know much about anything.
Right.
So I recommend doing a letter. And my first thought is, how do I put 55, 56 years of information into a letter?
Yeah.
I would have to write a novel, a really thick book.
Right.
And I just thought, I don't know. And Lana, she's so sweet. She goes, don't worry, we've got a template letter. You just put your own personal information in it. So I did. I wrote a letter and I really loved how precise it was. It was just a one-page letter. I put a picture of my birth mother in there, a picture of myself in there, and the verbiage that the template helps you to use, and then as well as my own, is just, hey, I did a DNA test. These are the results. I believe that you're my father, but I, I'm just inquiring if you'd like to meet, but, I'm not looking for anything. I'm well educated. I'm well loved. I own my own home, my own business. There's nothing
Hmm.
I want other than I just want to know who you are and maybe some medical history. And so I said, if you can at all possibly let me know. I mean, if you're not interested in having a relationship, I will respect your privacy, but just let me
Hmm.
know that I found you so that I can stop my search. And that's kind of that feeling of like, okay, we've come this far, we're going to go ahead and
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah. And so he doesn't respond right away, does he?
No, I believe I sent the letter off kind of the end of November, the beginning of December.
Hmm.
I'm just wondering, like, has he gotten it? In fact, it had been so long that Lana said, well, I think now you can send out word to your siblings. And so I sent word out, and I only had one that responded. She's my youngest sister. She's the youngest of all of his children. And she called and said, tell me again how you think we're related. I said, well, I think, I know that my DNA shows that I'm a 100% match, parent-child match to a man named George Jensen, and his wife is Susan Jensen. And she said, I think that's my father, or that is my father. I think we're sisters. I was like, I was all excited and thought, yeah, I think we must be. And so we talked for hours and hours and often for a couple weeks. And then I finally asked her, I said, do you think Dad has gotten my letter? And she said, yes, he's gotten your letter, but he's a little surprised,
Yeah.
obviously. He had no clue that I existed. And so he was reading my letter over and over because he didn't remember who my mother was. And you know, for um, all gentle purposes here, my parents didn't know each other, but this is the life of the 60s. I know I'm not the only one. There were lots of parties, a lot of alcohol.
Mhm.
On my birth mom's side, there was also drugs. So they were having these parties that they might not even remember the next day or who was at the party.
Mhm.
And my mother, I have three other half siblings on my mother's side, and all of us have different fathers. So she was very, I don't even know how you say it. She um, just made different choices than I probably would have
Right.
made. And so my parents didn't know each other. And so when I did the ancestry, my birth mother's cousin's daughter. I know it kind of took you a little down the line, but she had called my birth mother was still alive as well and said, "Hey, Cheryl's looking for family information." So she reached out to me and said, "Oh, do you remember who I am?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do." It's hard to forget, all of that abuse. And so, I tell her about what I'm doing, and she denies. She says, "That is not your father. I know who your father is." And I'm like, I don't think so. And I, don't have a relationship with her, so I don't know how much mentally she's there or, because when you have a life of alcohol and drugs for a long time, it's very easy to not remember certain things.
Right.
So my dad, going forward he gets this letter. He takes a couple weeks to process it. And on Christmas Day of 2019, my husband and I are out snowshoeing because we love the outdoors and we're kind of non-traditionalists. You know, uh, we go outdoors on Christmas Day. Well, we were finishing, we got back in the car, we drove to where we could get some cell service, and I get a ping on my phone and I look at it and it's a text, or not a text, a voicemail. So I listen to it and I just start bawling because it was like, "Hello, Cheryl. Merry Christmas. This is George Jensen, and I think I'm your father." And I lost it. It was just like the greatest Christmas gift anybody could ever have.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that day. And I was so excited. And so I waited till we got home to where we wouldn't be going in and out of cell range. And then I called him and we talked for 2, 3 hours. And it was just, I couldn't believe I actually could hear his voice.
Do you call Lana? Are you letting her know, hey, I finally got the call? Because I know she's probably anxiously waiting as well.
Yes, I do call. And uh, Lena, you can probably answer this a little bit better than me, what you were going through.
Yeah.
So I'll
Well,
let you do that.
it was during the pandemic, and my children and grandchildren, um, chose not to have any gatherings because of COVID. And so my husband and I were alone for Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. It was the hardest Christmas of my life not to have any family. And and then Cheryl calls, and it was late. It was probably 8, 9 o'clock, and which is fine. I'm not doing anything else. And she tells me that she got a message from her father, and that they spoke, and that he had no knowledge of her, but he just needed to digest the information after getting her letter, and reached out, and it was truly an amazing Christmas gift for me as well as for Cheryl. It
Yeah.
was just so touching.
Yeah. Because we,
And I think my father, when I actually talked to him, he said, "I may not know who your mother was, and this is all a big surprise." He said, "I know without a doubt you are mine because you look exactly like your sister." And I met her, and it's kind of scary how similar we are. Our, our hand, I'm trying not to talk with my hands, but we both talk with our hands. We, our mannerisms are very similar, and it's just kind of funny. And in my birth mother's side, with all the siblings, I felt like I never looked like them at all.
Hmm.
And it was, kind of like Lana's story. It's like, where did I come from? How do I, why do I have this look and my siblings have a different look?
right.
And then as soon as I met my dad and my sister, I went, "Oh, the Jensen genes are really
That's
strong."
fun.
So I definitely took after my father's
That's
side.
fun. Well, Cheryl, you shared some things with me previously that I thought were just so special. And I hope that you'll share them with those who are listening.
Mhm.
You were telling me about some of the things that you've been able to do with your dad since you've met, and been able to reenact some things that maybe should have happened in the past. Will you talk about some of those things? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Oh, yes. Um, I am not a controlling person. I'm not a pushy person. But I can be very direct and intentional. And so with my dad, I enjoy just spending time with him. And so he lives in an area where there's hills, and he used to walk, 2 or 3 miles a day. And we would go to this park. Once again, I travel from Washington down to California. I try to go see him uh, at least twice a year, and then we talk every week. But several of the visits, whenever I've been down there, we'll go on walks, and it's always great to have conversation as you're walking. But we would go to these different places. Like one was a park and it had children's swings and slides. And so I would sit in the swing and I'd say, okay, Dad, you need to push me. Remember, this is what you used to do. Wink, wink. And so, he caught on really quick. And he's like, oh, he was like, oh, come over here by the slide and I'll take a picture of you sliding down and we'll get a picture of us together on the slide. And so it was really cute. Another uh, place in their neighborhood is a little preschool. And just on the outside of the preschool building is one of those lending libraries for books. And there's a nice little bench to sit on so you can read the book. And so I was like, oh, Dad, I think you need to teach me to read. Here I am, in my late 50s, and I'm just like, you need to teach me how to read. And he played along. He loved it as well. So we got books and he'd sit there. We'd take pictures of him supposedly teaching me how to read a book and creating those kind of memories. And then one time I went down and I took materials, and my dad loves to do woodwork and he has a fun little shop in his garage. And so I brought down materials and we made birdhouses together. We made two of them, and I love mine and I think he loves his. And so, but it's just fun creating kind of those memories that you usually get as you're growing up as a little girl. And, I never got that. And so we try to, get together and do fun things. He loves the garden. I love to garden. So I've given him different plants and things to grow. He used to love fishing. I love fishing. I'm a fly fisher person, and I also do casting as well with just a regular fishing pole. And my husband and I every year usually go down in January for my birthday, and we go somewhere warm, very southern Mexico. Maybe I should say just north of Guatemala would probably be more accurate. And so this last year was my big 6-0. I was going to be turning 60, and I was telling him, I think I want to do some fishing. I think I'm going to get another pole for that. Well, before I left, my dad and my mom decided that they were going to gift me for my birthday a surf rod and reel. And so it breaks down. I could take it on the airplane. I took it all the way down there, and every day I went fishing, and everybody was like, whoa, what's that in the bag? It kind of looked like a machine gun, but it was a fishing pole and a reel. So I got some really fun looks and conversations going through airports and at our resort where we stayed. And it's just fun to say, yeah, my mom and my dad got this for me on my 60th
Yeah.
birthday. So it's a lot of those kinds of things, and we're still working at making memories.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. And I might have to make my dad do some things he might not feel comfortable doing now with me. We're gonna have to find a swing set, I think. So, Cheryl, you had shared with me that when you first started talking about DNA and your girlfriend had talked to you about her taking it, that you were a little bit hesitant at first of taking the DNA test. And you could have easily decided against that. And it is my assumption that there are probably lots of other people out there in the world who are sitting on that same fence trying to decide whether they really want to open that can of worms or I think
Mhm.
sometimes we put up that shield. I don't want to be rejected again. I've already been rejected by, a parent, or I wouldn't have be in this situation. And there's a lot of reasons why it's easy to talk ourselves out of being courageous enough to take that test. So, what advice would you give to somebody sitting up there on that fence right now about taking the steps to find their biological family?
Well, you're right, Kathy. There is the possibility of rejection. And for someone in similar situation to me, I felt rejection and abandonment pretty much throughout my whole growing up years. And um, I think the best advice I would give is not necessarily do the test or not do the test, but my advice is know who you are first. If you need counseling or you need to talk to your pastor, know who you are first. Be solid and grounded first before you go out there. And I felt like I knew who I was. I knew I was loved. I knew, the choices I had made for my life as far as career and family, from me moving forward. It's like, this is who I am. And I don't apologize for any of it. And just know who you are before you go, because there is that chance that you could be rejected. But just because you're rejected by other people, if you're solid in who you are, you'll still be that same solid person and still be able to function and go on and still give back to other people in your
Mhm.
life, your family, your community. And at least for me, that's where I was. I knew who I was, and I try to be a giving person. I try to be generous and take care of others as well.
Yeah, I think that's amazing advice. Um, so, your adopted parents had already passed by the time you begin your search. So, you didn't have to worry about hurting them in any way. But you've still got adopted siblings, and they're the biological children of your adopted parents. Do you worry how they're going to take the news, or just the fact that you're searching? Do you take them into consideration at all?
I did. I got to be really close with one of my adopted brothers. He actually looked very similar to my adopted dad. So I kind of felt like he was my pseudo dad for a long time. And I didn't necessarily tell him about the DNA until I realized that I was going to meet with my birth father and family. And so I thought I have to call my brother and talk to him about this. And I was a little nervous about it because I didn't want him or my other siblings to ever think that I was ungrateful and that I was going to now replace them with my biological father. My adopted mom and dad are my mom and dad. They're who raised me. They are who because of them, they have made me who I am today.
Absolutely.
And so calling my brother, I just kind of told him the story and what was happening and where we were at what stage of this story. And once again, you don't know if you're going to be faced with somebody being angry, somebody being
Mhm.
hurt, I just didn't know. And so I was trying to be gentle. And my brother came back with, I love this. I am so excited for you. And when you get back from your visit with them, I want you to call me and tell me all about it. And so I had that support from him. My other adopted siblings had already passed as well, because remember, the Greens were like grandparents' age. So all my siblings were the age of what my parents were. In fact, my brother that I just spoke about, it was older than my biological father. So it just seemed a little odd, um, that I would have a brother in his 80s and then my dad was just starting to come into his 80s. So it was real interesting.
So, Cheryl, you walked a pretty rough journey growing up, and you've certainly rose above it all and all the obstacles that were in your path. And you could have chosen not to search for your father, and you would have missed out on some great experiences. I'm a firm believer in the adage that knowledge is power. And while you may not have needed a whole lot more power in your life because you were so well grounded, but how do you feel that you've been empowered by learning who your biological father is?
I would say because of those new experiences, it keeps my mind fresh for new ideas in my music world. I I started writing a song. I hadn't even met my dad yet, and I started writing a song because I feel like whenever I have an experience, to be able to process it, I often will write music to express that. It's kind of my venue for getting that out of me and into the world. And so I had met my father. I wrote a song called Little Girl, and it could be any little girl in very similar shoes of mine. And so I felt like that was just a wonderful a tribute to my biological father. And I think we're going to be listening to that possibly. And so I loved it. But I also was finishing up my first album. And when it came, um, there's a nonprofit organization called Life Song for Orphans, and we had just been introduced to it. We helped a couple with the expenses of adoption, and all of these, because of meeting my dad and this whole adoption thing, and ideas just started rolling. And so my husband and I created a Cheryl Green Fund through that nonprofit so that any royalties that come in from people listening to my music, all of that goes to help other families with adopting children.
Mm.
And so I had asked my husband, do you think we should give like maybe a percentage of the royalties to, give it back? And he's like, yeah, that sounds good. In my mind, I was thinking 10%, maybe 20. But the next morning, he recalled our conversation and he said, Cheryl, I think we have been so blessed. I think we need to give 100% of that and give it to helping other families. So we made that decision to give all of our royalties to Lifesong under the Cheryl Green Foundation. And and I do concerts and I play my music, I tell my story, and all of that money goes to helping families. So we just finished last Saturday. I did a concert here locally, and it will be our ninth baby that we've helped with the expenses of being
Oh,
adopted. So
that's
it's
wonderful.
it's very empowering. It's given me a little more purpose for why I write music and why I do what I do.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Cheryl, thank you for joining me and sharing your story. I just appreciate how open and honest you were, and appreciate that you're going to let me share your song that you wrote at the end of this episode. And Lana, thank you for coming and for helping Cheryl on this journey. As someone who knows just how much you do for the adoption community, I genuinely thank you. Um,
You're welcome.
I hope that you'll join us next week when we share another journey to discovery. I'm Kathy Williams, and this is Search Angel Chronicles. appreciated Cheryl sharing her story with us today, and I'm so glad that she's been given the opportunity to meet her biological father and to get to spend some time with him, especially those fun moments like being pushed in the park swing or building a birdhouse with him. Making the decision to begin the hunt for biological family can be a scary one, but I'm glad that she made that hard choice and has been so blessed by it. I couldn't help but think about how her life was shaped by incredible adoptive parents. From loving her enough to sacrifice their wants to ensure she had the stability that she needed, to allowing her to pursue her amazing musical gift. And I think it's only fitting that the foundation that she has created gives assistance to individuals who are wanting to create homes for other children, just like her. Cheryl's song, Little Girl, playing in the background, is a moving tribute to the thoughts and desires of so many of us who have dreamed of knowing where we came from. I've included a link to this song on Spotify in the show notes, and I hope you'll check it out in its entirety. If you've enjoyed this episode, I hope you'll give us a like, and please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any new episodes. If you need to speak with a search angel, like Lana, who can give you guidance in your search, or if you've got a story that you'd like to share, please email me at searchangelchronicles@gmail.com. I hope you'll listen to the end. It has a heartwarming message you won't want to miss. Join us again next week on our journey to discovery.
Do you know I am yours? Do you even know my name? Could the color of our eyes be the same? Where are you? Where are you?
Hello, Cheryl. This is George Jensen. I think I'm your father.